Black Nanny shocked to see bruises on Billionaire Heiress's arms. Her truth stuns everyone. Renee Parker stared at the angry purple marks on 12-year-old Sophia Winthrop's forearm. The girl had winced when Renee helped her with her sweater, inadvertently pulling the sleeve up to reveal what looked like finger-shaped bruises. Their eyes met in the ornate bathroom mirror of the penthouse apartment, Sophia's wide with panic, Renee's dark with concern. "It's nothing," Sophia said quickly, yanking down her sleeve. "I fell during equestrian practice." Renee had worked for enough wealthy families during her 15 years as a nanny to recognize a lie when she heard one. But in the Winthrop household, asking questions could cost her the job she desperately needed. With 3 younger siblings relying on her income back home and her mother's mounting medical bills, Renee couldn't afford to lose this position. "Sophia," she began carefully, kneeling to meet the girl at eye level. "You know you can tell me anything, right? Anything at all." The young heiress's eyes welled with tears. "You wouldn't understand. Nobody does." She pushed past Renee and hurried from the bathroom. Renee remained kneeling on the Italian marble, her reflection fractured across the designer mirror's facets. In that moment, she faced the most difficult moral choice of her career. Ignore what she'd seen and keep the financial security her family needed, or risk everything to uncover the truth behind those bruises on a child who had everything money could buy, except, perhaps, safety. What she couldn't possibly know was that her decision would unravel secrets the Winthrop dynasty had buried for generations. Secrets that would shake Manhattan's elite to its core and force everyone, including Renee herself, to confront painful truths about power, privilege, and the true meaning of protection. 3 months earlier, Renee had stood in the gleaming lobby of the Winthrop Tower, clutching her resume and trying not to be intimidated by the soaring ceiling and the security guards who eyed her with thinly veiled suspicion. The elevator that carried her to the penthouse interview was lined with actual gold, making her feel even more out of place in her carefully pressed blouse and second-hand blazer. Billionaire Winthrop had greeted her with a professional smile that never quite reached her eyes. At 45, the media mogul and Winthrop publishing heiress was striking rather than beautiful, with sharp cheekbones and an even sharper gaze that seemed to catalog Renee's every flaw. "Your references are excellent," Billionaire said, glancing at Renee's resume. "Harvard education, experience with the Bennetts and the Schwarzmans. Why leave such prestigious positions for us?" There was something pointed in her question, as if she already knew the answer. Renee maintained her composure. "The Bennetts relocated to London, and the Schwarzman children are now in boarding school. I'm looking for a long-term position with a family that values education and structure." She didn't mention how the Bennetts had tried to convince her to move abroad with them, offering a substantial raise. She couldn't leave her family behind. "And my daughter certainly needs structure," Billionaire murmured, setting down the resume. "Sophia is challenging, gifted, but strong-willed. Her father indulged her before he passed." "I'm so sorry for your loss," Renee said automatically. "It's been 3 years," Billionaire replied dismissively. "We've adapted, but Sophia has been through 4 nannies since. None could handle her specific needs." "I specialize in helping children through difficult transitions," Renee said confidently, though inwardly she wondered what specific needs meant. "May I ask what happened with the previous nannies?" Billionaire's smile tightened. "They weren't suited for a child of Sophia's intensity." "The position includes a private suite on the lower level, full benefits, and a salary of $120,000 annually. You'd have weekends off unless we're traveling. We spend summers in the Hamptons and winters in Aspen, with occasional trips abroad." The salary was nearly double what Renee had made with the Bennetts. It would cover her mother's treatments and her siblings' education with room to spare. Too good to be true, perhaps, but impossible to refuse. "When would you need me to start?" Renee asked, her mind already calculating how quickly she could move her few possessions into the Winthrop Tower. "Immediately," Billionaire said. "Sophia returns from boarding school tomorrow. She was asked to leave after an incident. I need someone in place when she arrives." Renee should have asked about the incident, but the salary figure was still ringing in her ears. "I can start tomorrow morning." Billionaire stood, extending her hand. "Welcome to the Winthrop family, Ms. Parker." The handshake felt like sealing a pact Renee didn't fully understand. The first week with Sophia had been a silent war. The girl barely spoke, answering Renee's questions with monosyllables or shrugs. She was pale and thin for 12, with her mother's sharp features softened by youth and long blonde hair she used as a curtain between herself and the world. "Your mother mentioned you're gifted in mathematics," Renee tried one afternoon while supervising Sophia's homework. I studied mathematical theory at Harvard. Perhaps we could— My mother doesn't know anything about me, Sophia interrupted, her blue eyes flashing. And neither do you. Renee took a breath, reminding herself that behind every difficult child was a reason. You're right, I don't know you yet, but I'd like to, Sophia scoffed. That's what they all say, then they leave. I'm not planning to leave, Renee said gently. You will. Sophia turned back to her textbook. Everyone does. Breaking through to Sophia was like trying to scale a wall made of glass, smooth, cold, and impossible to grip. But Renee had experience with walls. She'd built plenty of her own growing up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, the oldest of 4 children raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs. Renee's own father had walked out when she was 10. She recognized the abandonment in Sophia's eyes, even if the girl's circumstances couldn't have been more different from her own. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during their second week together. Renee was helping Sophia with advanced calculus when she noticed the girl making a simple arithmetic error repeatedly. Try a different approach, Renee suggested, scribbling an alternative method in the margins of Sophia's notebook. Sometimes our brains just get stuck in a pattern. Sophia stared at Renee's notation. That's actually clever, she admitted grudgingly. Math was my escape, Renee said, seizing the moment of connection. When everything else was chaos, equations made sense. Something flickered in Sophia's eyes, recognition perhaps. My dad taught me math, she said quietly, before he got sick. He must have been a good teacher, Renee offered. You have incredible intuition for it. He was an investment banker, but he loved pure mathematics. Mom wanted me to focus on economics or business, something useful for running the company someday. Dad said I should follow what makes the universe make sense. Sophia's voice grew softer. After he died, Mom hired tutors who only taught the practical applications. It was the longest conversation they'd had, and Renee recognized it for the gift it was. What if we made a deal? We finish the assigned work your mother expects, and then we explore the mathematical concepts that interest you. Sophia considered this, twirling her pencil. You wouldn't tell my mother? It would be our academic secret, Renee promised, though she felt a twinge of discomfort at the idea of keeping anything from her employer. Sophia offered a small smile, the first Renee had seen. Deal. Over the following weeks, a fragile trust formed between them. After completing her official schoolwork, Sophia would eagerly dive into abstract mathematical concepts with Renee. The girl's brilliant mind came alive, reminding Renee why she'd loved teaching before financial necessity had pushed her into more lucrative private childcare. Billionaire Winthrop remained a distant figure, appearing at breakfast in immaculate business attire to quiz Sophia on her studies before disappearing into her empire for the day. Occasionally, she would emerge in evening wear for charity galas or business dinners, leaving Renee and Sophia to their quiet evenings in the penthouse. Does your mother always work such long hours? Renee asked one night as they prepared dinner together, something Billionaire didn't know Renee was teaching Sophia to do. Always, Sophia replied, carefully chopping vegetables. Especially since Dad died, she says she has to work twice as hard now that she's the only Winthrop steering the ship. That must be difficult for both of you, Renee observed. Sophia's knife paused. She wasn't always like this. When Dad was alive, she laughed sometimes. The girl resumed chopping with more force than necessary. Now she's just cold. Renee thought of her own mother who, despite exhaustion, always found time to ask about her children's days, to touch their heads affectionately as she passed. Different worlds, different pressures, but still children needed presence more than presence. People grieve differently, Renee said carefully. Sometimes throwing yourself into work feels safer than facing the pain. Is that what happened with your dad? Sophia asked suddenly, looking up with those perceptive eyes. Renee nearly cut herself in surprise. What do you know about my father? I Googled you, Sophia said matter-of-factly. There was an article about your family when you got the scholarship to Harvard. It mentioned your father wasn't in the picture. Renee set down her knife, unsure whether to be impressed or disturbed by Sophia's research. Yes, he left when I was about your age. And yes, my mother worked all the time afterward, but she was working to keep us fed and housed. It was different. Different circumstances, same result, Sophia said with a wisdom beyond her years. The parent who stays disappears too, just in a different way. Renee had no response to that insight. Instead, she redirected. Let's finish this stir-fry before your mother comes home and discovers I'm turning you into a chef. But Billionaire didn't come home that night, sending a text that she was staying in the company apartment near the office to prepare for an early meeting. It happened frequently enough that Sophia didn't seem surprised, though Renee noticed how the girl's shoulders slumped slightly at the news. Later, after tucking Sophia into bed, a ritual the girl pretended to find childish, but secretly seemed to enjoy. Renee retreated to her own suite on the lower level of the penthouse. The suite was larger than the entire apartment she'd grown up in, with a bedroom, living area, and private bathroom all decorated in tasteful neutrals. She video-called her family as she did each night, her smile automatic as her siblings crowded around their mother's phone screen. "How's the little rich girl?" asked Marcus, her 15-year-old brother. "She's just a child who's lost her father," Renee replied gently. "Not so different from you." "Except for the billion-dollar trust fund," Marcus snorted. "Marcus," their mother chided softly, though Renee could see the fatigue in her eyes. The chemotherapy was taking its toll. "How are you feeling, Mom?" Renee asked, changing the subject. "Strong as an ox," her mother lied with a smile. "The doctors are pleased." They both knew that wasn't entirely true, but they maintained the fiction for the younger children's benefit. Renee's salary was covering the experimental treatments insurance wouldn't, but time was still an unforgiving enemy. "I sent extra this month," Renee said later, when the younger ones had gone to bed and it was just her and her mother on the call. "You're doing too much already, baby," her mother protested. "You need to live your own life, too." "This is my life," Renee insisted. "Getting you well, helping the kids, I'm exactly where I need to be." But after the call ended, sitting alone in her luxurious cage in the sky, Renee wondered if that was entirely true. The position with the Winthrops was solving her family's financial problems, but at what cost? She was living in a world of extreme privilege while her family struggled in their small Brooklyn apartment. The contrast made her heart ache with a guilt she couldn't quite shake. She pushed the feeling aside. She was doing what was necessary, what was right for her family. And perhaps she was beginning to think, for Sophia as well. As May turned to June, Renee and Sophia settled into a comfortable rhythm. Weekday mornings were devoted to Sophia's schoolwork, afternoons to activities ranging from museum visits to tennis lessons, and evenings often found them discussing mathematics or literature over meals they prepared together. Weekends, when Renee was officially off duty, felt increasingly empty, and she found herself missing Sophia's quick mind and dry observations. Alina remained a peripheral figure, approving of Sophia's improved academic performance and behavior without questioning how Renee had achieved what previous nannies could not. Occasionally, Renee would catch Alina watching her daughter with an expression that might have been longing, quickly masked when she realized she was observed. "Your mother mentioned we'll be moving to the Hamptons house next week for the summer," Renee said one afternoon as they walked through Central Park. It was a perfect June day, the kind that made even Manhattan feel almost peaceful. "Great," Sophia muttered. 3 months of her throwing parties for people she doesn't even like while pretending we're the perfect family." "You don't enjoy the Hamptons?" Renee asked, surprised. Most children would be thrilled at the prospect of a summer by the ocean in one of the most exclusive communities in America. "It's where Dad got sick," Sophia said, kicking at a stone on the path. "The summer before he died, he was fine and then suddenly he wasn't. Brain aneurysm, they said, no warning." "I'm so sorry, Sophia," Renee said gently. "Everyone's sorry," the girl said bitterly. "Sorry doesn't bring him back." She looked up at Renee with sudden intensity. "You're coming with us, right?" "To the Hamptons." "Of course," Renee assured her. "That's part of the job." "It's not just a job, though, is it?" Sophia asked, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I mean, we're friends, sort of, aren't we?" The question caught Renee off guard. Professional boundaries had always been clear in her previous positions, but something about Sophia, her brilliance, her loneliness, the walls she was finally letting down had gotten under Renee's skin. "I care about you very much," Renee said carefully. "More than just a job, but I'm still your nanny, and that means certain responsibilities." Sophia seemed to accept this complicated answer, nodding thoughtfully. "Mom has a lot of parties planned this summer, important people coming to the house." "Is that unusual?" Renee asked. "No, but," Sophia hesitated, "this summer is different. She's been making a lot of calls, having meetings she doesn't want me to know about. I think something's happening with the company." Renee considered this. "Companies often have confidential business matters. I'm sure if it affected you directly, she'd tell you." Sophia gave her a look that suggested Renee was being naive. "Mom only tells me what she thinks I need to know, which isn't much. But I listen. There's talk about a merger or acquisition, something big." "Sophia," Renee said gently, "eavesdropping on your mother's business calls isn't appropriate." "Neither is keeping secrets that affect my future," Sophia retorted. "Winthrop Publishing has been in our family for 4 generations. Dad always said it would be mine someday. What if she's selling it?" The girl's distress was genuine, and Renee felt a pang of sympathy. To Sophia, the publishing company wasn't just a business. It was her heritage, a connection to her father and his legacy. Have you tried asking her directly? Sophia laughed without humor. You've met my mother. Questions are distractions from productivity. It reached the edge of the park, where the Winthrops' driver waited with the car. Sophia fell silent as they approached, the moment of openness passing as quickly as it had come. That evening, Alina arrived home earlier than usual, bringing with her a man Renee hadn't met before. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power, he smiled broadly at Sophia. "There's my favorite mathematician," he greeted her, arms open for a hug that Sophia reluctantly entered. "Uncle Richard," she murmured against his expensive suit. "I didn't know you were coming." "Last-minute decision," he said, releasing her. "Your mother and I have business to discuss, and I couldn't pass up the chance to see you." Alina made introductions. "Renee, this is Richard Harrington, my late husband's brother and our family attorney. Richard, this is Sophia's new nanny, Renee Parker." "Harvard education, I hear," Richard said, shaking Renee's hand firmly. "Alina always finds the best." Something about his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, reminding Renee uncomfortably of Alina's own practiced expressions. "Renee, could you take Sophia to her room for the evening?" Alina asked in a tone that was clearly not a request. "Richard and I need to review some documents." "Of course," Renee agreed. "Sophia still has some reading to complete for tomorrow." "Actually," Sophia interjected, "Uncle Richard promised last time that he'd show me Dad's old mathematics journals. He's been keeping them at his office for safekeeping, remember?" A flash of annoyance crossed Richard's face before his smile returned. "Did I? My memory must be slipping in my old age. Perhaps next time, Sophia. These documents can't wait, I'm afraid." Sophia's expression hardened, but she allowed Renee to lead her from the room. Once they were in the hallway, she hissed, "He's lying. Dad's journals are important to me, and he knows it. They're probably discussing whatever they're planning for the company." "Sophia," Renee whispered, "your mother asked for privacy." "It's my family legacy, too," Sophia insisted, pulling away from Renee's gentle grasp. Before Renee could stop her, she had pressed herself against the wall beside the slightly ajar door to Alina's study, positioning herself to listen. Renee faced another moral dilemma. Dragging Sophia away would create a scene and alert Alina and Richard to their presence. Leaving her to eavesdrop violated Alina's trust. Torn, Renee decided to stay with Sophia but try to persuade her to leave after a moment. Concerned about the timing, Richard's voice drifted through the gap. "Winthrop stocks are undervalued right now. Waiting until fall could mean an additional $30 million in the deal." "I'm not concerned about maximizing profit," Alina replied coolly. "I want this done before Sophia turns 13. The trust stipulations are clear." "James never intended for this interpretation," Richard argued. "My brother wanted Winthrop Publishing to remain in family hands, specifically Sophia's when she's of age." "What James wanted doesn't matter anymore," Alina said sharply. "He's gone, and I'm the one dealing with the reality of running this company while raising a difficult child alone." Sophia flinched as if slapped. Renee placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Sophia is James's daughter," Richard said, his tone hardening. "Everything he did was for her future." "And I'm ensuring that future by making this deal," Alina countered. "Cowell Media is offering $2 billion plus a guaranteed board position for me. Sophia's trust will be secure, and she'll be free to pursue whatever she wants without the burden of running a legacy media company in a dying industry." "She deserves a choice," Richard insisted. "She's 12, Alina snapped. "She can't possibly understand what's best. This conversation is over, Richard. Either support me in this, or I'll find another legal team who will." There was silence, then the sound of papers shuffling. "I'll have the preliminary documents ready next week," Richard said finally, his tone defeated. "But I want it on record that I believe James would have opposed this decision." "Duly noted," Alina replied coldly. Sophia had heard enough. She pushed away from the wall and ran down the hallway toward her room, her footsteps thankfully muffled by the thick carpet. Renee hurried after her, heart pounding with the knowledge they'd just acquired. She found Sophia sitting on her bedroom floor, back against her bed, knees pulled to her chest. She wasn't crying. Renee had rarely seen Sophia cry, but her face was tight with a fury that seemed too adult for her young features. "She's selling everything," Sophia said flatly as Renee closed the door behind her. "Everything Dad built, everything that was supposed to be mine." Renee sat beside her on the floor, uncertain what to say. Professionally, she should remind Sophia that adult business decisions were not her concern. But the girl's pain was real, and dismissing it felt cruel. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," she said finally. "I'm not," Sophia replied. "At least now I know the truth." She looked at Renee with eyes that had gone cold. She called me a burden, a difficult child. People say things in business meetings they don't really mean, Renee tried, though the excuse sounded hollow even to her own ears. No, she meant it. She's always meant it. Sophia's voice was frighteningly calm. Dad was the only one who ever really wanted me. To her, I'm just an obligation, something to manage. Your mother loves you, Renee said automatically. Sophia gave her a pitying look. You still don't get it, do you? In this world, her world, love isn't about feelings. It's about assets and liabilities, and I'm definitely a liability. The girl's cynicism broke Renee's heart. That's not true, Sophia. You're a brilliant, amazing person with so much to offer. To who? Sophia challenged. Not to her, she barely knows me. Renee had no good answer. Instead, she offered her presence, sitting quietly beside Sophia as the girl stared into space, her mind clearly working through the implications of what she'd heard. After a long silence, Sophia spoke again. You need to help me. Help you how? Renee asked cautiously. I need to talk to Uncle Richard alone. He was Dad's brother. He'll help me stop this if I ask him. Sophia's eyes gleamed with determination. But Mom will never leave us alone together now. She knows he's not fully on board with the sale. Sophia, I can't interfere in your family business matters, Renee said gently but firmly. That's far outside my role as your nanny. So what is your role? Sophia demanded. To just follow orders, to watch while she destroys everything my father built for me. The accusation stung. My role is to care for you, to support your education and well-being. Then support me in this, Sophia pleaded. All I'm asking is for a chance to speak with my uncle privately. Is that so wrong? Put that way, it didn't seem unreasonable. And yet Renee knew she would be deliberately going against Aliner's wishes, potentially jeopardizing her position. I'll think about it, she said finally. But for now, you should get ready for bed. We have a full day of lessons tomorrow before the move to the Hamptons. Sophia nodded, seemingly satisfied with this non-commitment. As Renee helped her prepare for bed, a ritual the girl had initially rejected but now seemed to find comforting, she wondered if she was crossing a line from nanny to co-conspirator. The thought was troubling, but so was the idea of betraying Sophia's trust when the girl had so few people she could rely on. Later that night, unable to sleep, Renee found herself replaying Aliner's words, a difficult child. She thought of Sophia's brilliance, her vulnerability beneath the defensive walls, her hunger for connection. Yes, she could be challenging, but what had shaped her that way? The loss of her father, certainly, but perhaps also the coldness of her mother, the weight of expectations that came with the Winthrop name. Renee's phone buzzed with a text from her brother. Mom's back in the hospital. Don't worry, just precautionary, but thought you should know. The familiar knot of anxiety tightened in her chest. Her mother had been doing better lately, the expensive treatment seeming to help. But cancer was unpredictable, cruel in its persistence. She needed this job. Her family needed this job. And yet something about the Winthrop household felt increasingly like quicksand, pulling her into dynamics and decisions that went far beyond childcare. Tomorrow they would leave for the Hamptons. Perhaps the change of scenery would provide clarity, a reset for all of them. But as Renee finally drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was heading into deeper waters than she had ever navigated before. The Winthrop summer estate in East Hampton made the Manhattan penthouse look modest by comparison. Sprawling across 5 manicured acres with direct beach access, the main house was a modern interpretation of a classic shingled mansion, with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded every room with Atlantic light. Renee and Sophia arrived ahead of Aliner, who was finalizing details in the city before joining them for the weekend. The staff, a household manager, a chef, 2 housekeepers, a gardener, and a driver, welcomed them with practiced efficiency. Renee noted how they greeted Sophia with genuine warmth, suggesting they had known her since childhood. Mrs. Mitchell. Sophia actually smiled as she embraced the household manager, a dignified woman in her 60s. I was worried you might have retired. And miss seeing how much you've grown? Never, Mrs. Mitchell replied fondly, holding Sophia at arm's length to examine her. Though you're still too thin, we'll have to fix that. She turned to Renee with an appraising look. Ms. Parker, welcome to Windward. I trust your suite will be satisfactory, but please let me know if you require anything. Renee's suite turned out to be a charming guest cottage adjacent to the main house, offering a degree of privacy she hadn't expected. It was decorated in soothing blues and whites, with a small porch overlooking a section of garden dotted with hydrangeas. This is lovely, she told Mrs. Mitchell honestly. Far more than I need. Ms. Winthrop believes staff comfort is essential to household harmony, the older woman replied with practiced smoothness, though something in her tone suggested this might not always have been Aliner's philosophy. Once settled, Renee found Sophia in what appeared to be a home office, examining framed photographs on the wall. They showed a handsome man with Sophia's eyes, often pictured on boats or with financial figures gathered around conference tables. "My dad," Sophia said without turning around. "This was his study when we stayed here. Mom never changed it." "He was very handsome," Renee observed, joining Sophia at the wall. "You have his eyes. And his aptitude for numbers," Sophia added with a hint of pride. "Mom has an eye for design and words. Dad always said I got the best of both of them, but..." "But what?" Renee prompted when Sophia fell silent. "Sometimes I think Mom resents that I'm more like him than her." Sophia touched a photo where her father held a much younger version of herself on his shoulders, both beaming at the camera. "The last summer he was alive, we spent hours in here. He was teaching me about the stock market, investment strategies." Mom thought it was ridiculous to burden a child with finance. "She might have just wanted you to enjoy being a kid," Renee suggested gently. Sophia shrugged. "I enjoyed being with him, learning what he loved. After he died, she packed away all his teaching materials, the special books he bought me, said we needed to move forward." The pain in Sophia's voice was palpable. "Moving forward doesn't mean forgetting," Renee said. "Sometimes parents think they're protecting their children by avoiding painful reminders." "Or maybe she just wanted to erase him," Sophia countered, turning away from the photos. "Make it easier to sell his life's work." Before Renee could respond, Mrs. Mitchell appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Parker, there's a call for you, your brother." Concern immediately flooded Renee. Marcus rarely called during the day unless it was important. "Excuse me, Sophia, I need to take this." In the privacy of the kitchen, Renee took the call. "Marcus, is everything okay? How's Mom?" Her brother's voice was tight with tension. "They're keeping her for more tests. The doctors found something on her scan they don't like." Renee closed her eyes, leaning against the counter for support. "How serious is it?" "They're not saying much, but I overheard them talking about new treatment options, expensive ones." The implication was clear. Whatever progress they'd thought her mother was making had been temporary. The cancer was fighting back, and they would need more resources to combat it. "I'll send more money," Renee said automatically, "and I'll see if I can get a weekend off soon to come visit." "Don't worry about visiting," Marcus said quickly. "Mom doesn't want you to see her like this anyway. We need the money, Ren, soon." After promising to wire funds immediately, Renee ended the call and stood in the silent kitchen, trying to compose herself before returning to Sophia. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. Her mother was fighting for her life, her siblings needed stability, and all of it depended on Renee maintaining her position with the Winthrops. Mrs. Mitchell reappeared with a glass of water. "Family troubles?" she asked kindly. "My mother is ill," Renee admitted, accepting the water gratefully. "Cancer." The older woman's face softened with understanding. "I'm very sorry to hear that. If you need flexibility with your schedule for family matters, I can speak with Ms. Winthrop." "Thank you, but that won't be necessary," Renee said quickly, too quickly perhaps, judging by Mrs. Mitchell's raised eyebrow. "I mean, I need to be here for Sophia and for the income." Mrs. Mitchell studied her for a moment. "You're the longest-lasting nanny Sophia has had since Mr. Winthrop passed. She seems to have connected with you." "She's a remarkable girl," Renee said. "Brilliant, thoughtful, she just needs someone to see her." "Yes," Mrs. Mitchell agreed. "She does." There was something weighted in her tone, as if she were conveying a message beyond her words. "Ms. Winthrop arrives tomorrow with guests. The first of many this summer, I expect. Sophia usually finds these gatherings challenging." Renee understood the warning. "I'll keep her occupied." "See that you do," Mrs. Mitchell said. "And Ms. Parker, be careful with your loyalties in this house. The lines between family and staff can become blurred, especially where Sophia is concerned." Before Renee could ask what she meant, the older woman had moved on, leaving Renee to wonder if she'd just received advice or a veiled threat. Elena arrived the next day in a convoy of black SUVs, bringing with her 6 guests and an air of tense expectation that permeated the house. Among them was Richard Harrington, who greeted Sophia with genuine affection despite the awkwardness of their last encounter. "Ms. Parker," Elena addressed Renee formally, "I'll need Sophia presentable for dinner at 7. Business casual. She'll be joining us for the first hour only." "Yes, Ms. Winthrop," Renee replied, noting how Sophia's posture stiffened at being discussed as if she weren't present. As the adults dispersed to their assigned guest rooms, Richard lingered behind. "Sophia, I've brought something for you," he said, producing a slim package from his briefcase. "Your father's special edition of Bertrand Russell's Introduction to Mathematical Philosophy. I found it while organizing some of his things." Sophia's eyes widened. "Really? Mom said all his books were donated." "Most were," Richard acknowledged with a slight grimace. But I managed to save a few I knew were special to him, and to you. Alina reappeared in the doorway, her expression cooling as she took in the scene. Richard, Charles Cowell is asking for you. Something about the preliminary valuation metrics. Of course, Richard replied smoothly, handing the package to Sophia. We'll catch up properly later, mathematician. As Richard followed Alina, Renee caught the significant look that passed between them, a warning from Alina, a subtle defiance from Richard. The tension between them was palpable, and Sophia clearly sensed it too, clutching her father's book to her chest like armor. That's Charles Cowell, Sophia whispered to Renee once they were alone. CEO of Cowell Media, the company buying us out. Sophia, Renee cautioned, whatever is happening with your mother's business, our business, Sophia corrected sharply. My inheritance. It's not something you should be involving yourself in right now, Renee finished gently. You're 12, these are complex adult decisions. That affect my future, Sophia insisted. Dad always said Winthrop Publishing would be mine someday. It's been in our family for generations. I can't just let her sell it to strangers. Renee sighed, guiding Sophia toward the stairs. Let's get you ready for dinner. Maybe you'll learn more about what's happening if you listen instead of confronting. Sophia reluctantly allowed herself to be led upstairs, but Renee could practically see the wheels turning in her brilliant mind, formulating plans and strategies. This dinner was going to be a minefield. At precisely 7, Renee escorted a reluctantly cooperative Sophia to the dining room. The girl had allowed Renee to style her hair in a simple but elegant half-up arrangement, and had agreed to wear a navy summer dress that softened her usual severe appearance. The adults were already seated around the massive dining table, drinks in hand, conversation flowing in the practiced cadence of people accustomed to business socializing. Alina at the head of the table wore an ivory sheath dress that emphasized her slender frame and an expression of polished hospitality that didn't quite reach her eyes. Ah, here she is, Alina said as Sophia entered, extending a hand toward her daughter. Charles, you remember my daughter, Sophia? A ruddy-faced man in his 50s stood, smiling broadly at Sophia. My word, you've grown since I last saw you. You were what, 8, 9? 7, Sophia corrected coolly. At my father's funeral. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Alina's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Sophia, why don't you sit here between Richard and Mrs. Cowell? Alina suggested, deftly steering the conversation away from dangerous waters. Throughout the first course, Sophia remained quiet, observing the adults with calculating attention while picking at her food. Renee, standing discreetly near the door as was expected of her during formal dinners, watched the dynamics unfold with growing concern. The conversation deliberately avoided specific business matters, focusing instead on neutral topics like the upcoming charity season and recent vacations. But underneath ran currents of tension, particularly between Alina and Richard, who seemed to be engaged in a silent battle punctuated by loaded glances. Sophia, tell Charles about your recent mathematics competition, Alina prompted during a lull, clearly trying to showcase her daughter's accomplishments. I won first place, Sophia said without enthusiasm. Regional level. Impressive, Charles Cowell nodded. A mind for numbers, just like your father, he could calculate risk better than anyone I've ever known. Except he didn't see his aneurysm coming, Sophia said bluntly. Some risks can't be calculated. Alina set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. Sophia, perhaps it's time for you to excuse yourself. Ms. Parker can bring your dessert to the library. But we haven't even started talking about the acquisition yet, Sophia said with feigned innocence. Isn't that why everyone's here? To discuss selling my inheritance? The table fell silent. Charles Cowell looked uncomfortably at Alina, whose face had gone rigid with controlled anger. Sophia, she said in a dangerously calm voice, that's enough. I think it's actually not enough, Sophia countered, her voice rising slightly. Don't I deserve to know what's happening to my family's company? The company Dad built for me to run someday? Your father built that company for the family, Alina corrected tightly, and as the current CEO and majority shareholder, I'm making decisions based on what's best for its future, and yours. By selling it to strangers, Sophia challenged. By ensuring its legacy continues with proper resources behind it, Alina replied. The publishing industry is changing rapidly. Cowell Media has the digital infrastructure and global reach to take what your father built and make it truly sustainable for the future. This is not a conversation for the dinner table, Richard interjected gently. Perhaps we could know, Sophia interrupted, her composure cracking. I want to know why. Why are you selling now right before my 13th birthday? What's in Dad's trust that makes the timing so important? Alina's face paled slightly. That's enough. Ms. Parker, please take Sophia to her room. Renee moved forward immediately, placing a gentle hand on Sophia's shoulder. Come on, Sophia, let's go. But Sophia shrugged her off, standing her ground. Uncle Richard, you know what Dad wanted. Tell her. Richard looked pained, caught between loyalty to his niece and his professional obligations. Sophia, these are complex matters. Your mother is trying to secure your future by ignoring Dad's wishes, Sophia pressed. That's enough. Elinor slammed her hand on the table, causing glasses to rattle. The veneer of control had finally cracked. You have no idea what your father wanted because you were a child when he died. I am your mother and the head of this family, and you will respect my decisions. Sophia stared at her mother, tears welling in her eyes. Dad would be ashamed of you, she whispered. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. For a moment, something raw and wounded flashed across Elinor's face, quickly replaced by cold fury. Go to your room, she ordered. Now. Sophia turned and fled, ignoring Renee, who hurried after her. The dinner party sat in stunned silence behind them. Renee found Sophia in her bedroom, not crying as she had expected, but methodically packing a small backpack. What are you doing? Renee asked cautiously. I'm going to find Dad's trust documents, Sophia replied without looking up. Uncle Richard keeps copies at the guest house. He always stays in the same one when he visits. Sophia, you can't just... Are you going to stop me? Sophia challenged, finally meeting Renee's gaze. Or tell my mother, Renee hesitated. Professionally, she should do exactly that, but the desperation in Sophia's eyes gave her pause. This isn't the way, she said gently. Breaking into your uncle's private papers won't solve anything. Then what will? Sophia demanded. She won't listen to me. She's never listened to me, not since Dad died. Renee sat on the edge of Sophia's bed, choosing her words carefully. I understand how painful this is, but running around the property at night, going through legal documents you might not even understand, that won't help your cause. Then what should I do? Sophia asked, her voice smaller now, reminding Renee that despite her intelligence and fierce determination, she was still just 12 years old. Talk to your uncle properly, Renee suggested. Ask him directly about the trust without the audience. He seems to care about you and your father's wishes. Sophia considered this. Mom will never leave us alone together now. Let me worry about that, Renee said, making a decision she hoped wouldn't cost her job. Tomorrow morning I'll arrange something, but you have to promise me you won't do anything reckless tonight. After a moment, Sophia nodded reluctantly. Fine, but if this doesn't work. One step at a time, Renee said, relieved that at least for tonight a crisis had been averted. Later, after Sophia had finally fallen asleep, Renee returned to her cottage and called her mother's hospital room. Her sister Tanya answered, voice thick with fatigue. How is she? Renee asked, bracing herself for bad news. Stable, Tanya replied. They've adjusted her meds. The new treatment starts next week. I sent money for the first round, Renee said. I'll figure out the rest soon. The doctor mentioned a clinical trial, Tanya said hesitantly. It might be covered, but she'd need to go to Baltimore. Someone would have to go with her. Renee closed her eyes, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. I'll figure something out, she promised, though she had no idea how. After hanging up, Renee sat on her small porch, watching distant lights on the water. The cool evening air carried the scent of salt and flowers, a world away from her family's reality in Brooklyn. She had come to the Winthrops seeking financial security, but found herself entangled in a family drama that threatened to pull her in multiple directions. Tomorrow, she would help Sophia speak with her uncle, potentially undermining Elinor's authority. The risk to her position was real, but so was Sophia's pain. Where did her true responsibility lie? With her employer who paid the salary that kept her mother alive? Or with the child who trusted her, who needed an advocate in a world where money and power seemed to trump emotional needs? As the lights across the bay winked like distant stars, Renee had no answers, only questions that followed her into uneasy dreams. Morning brought clear skies and the distant sound of waves breaking on the private beach. Renee woke early, formulating a plan that would allow Sophia to speak privately with her uncle without directly defying Elinor's wishes. She found Richard Harrington already up, walking along the shoreline with a cup of coffee in hand. Approaching him directly seemed risky but necessary. Mr. Harrington, she called, hurrying across the sand. Good morning. He turned, surprise evident on his face. Ms. Parker, early riser as well. When necessary, she replied. I was hoping I might speak with you about Sophia. His expression became guarded. In what capacity? As someone who cares about her well-being, Renee said honestly. Last night was difficult for her, Richard sighed, looking out at the ocean. Elinor is making a mistake, but my hands are legally tied. James's trust arrangement was complex. That's actually what I wanted to discuss, Renee ventured. Sophia desperately wants to understand what's happening with her father's company. She feels she has a right to know. She does, Richard agreed, his voice lowering. But Alina has primary decision-making power until Sophia turns 18. The only exception would have been. When he trailed off, Renee pressed gently. Would have been what? Richard studied her face, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. James included a special provision. If Sophia showed exceptional aptitude and interest in the business before turning 13, a separate educational trust would activate, giving her certain protections regarding the company's future. And her 13th birthday is coming up next month, Renee realized. Precisely, Richard nodded. Alina is rushing this sale to prevent that provision from activating. Once Sophia turns 13, things become more complicated. Does Sophia know about this provision? No, Richard said. Alina insisted we not burden her with business matters at a young age. James wouldn't have agreed, but... He shrugged helplessly. Renee took a chance. Sophia needs to speak with you about this, privately. Richard glanced back toward the house. Alina wouldn't approve. Alina doesn't need to know, Renee said, surprising herself with her boldness. Sophia and I are scheduled for a beach walk and reading time this morning, if you happen to be at the far cove around 10. A faint smile crossed his face. I do enjoy morning walks on the beach. The far cove has always been particularly peaceful. Thank you, Renee said sincerely. Don't thank me yet, Richard cautioned. This situation is more complicated than you realize. There are factors at play beyond the business aspect. Before Renee could ask what he meant, they were interrupted by the household manager calling from the terrace that breakfast was being served. Their conversation ended with a significant nod of understanding from Richard. At breakfast, Alina announced that she and her guests would be golfing at the club, followed by lunch meetings, and wouldn't return until evening. This unexpected development made Renee's plan even easier to execute. By 10 o'clock, she and Sophia were walking along the beach toward the secluded cove at the property's edge. Sophia, informed of the plan, was unusually quiet, clutching a small notebook filled with questions she had prepared. Remember, Renee cautioned, keep your emotions in check, ask specific questions, listen to the answers even if they're not what you want to hear. Sophia nodded solemnly. I just want to understand what Dad really wanted. Mom keeps saying she's doing what's best for me, but how can selling our family legacy be what's best? Try to keep an open mind, Renee advised. Your uncle might have insights you haven't considered. They found Richard waiting as promised, sitting on a large piece of driftwood looking pensively out at the water. He smiled when he saw them, though his eyes held concern. My favorite mathematician, he greeted Sophia. I've been hoping for a chance to speak with you properly. I have questions, Sophia said without preamble, opening her notebook. About Dad's trust and the sale. Richard glanced at Renee, who nodded encouragingly. I'll give you some privacy, she said, moving to a spot farther down the beach, close enough to see them but not to hear their conversation. As she waited, watching the pair in intense discussion, Renee's phone buzzed with a text from the Winthrop household manager, Ms. Winthrop returning early. Where are you and Sophia? Renee felt a spike of alarm. She quickly replied, beach walk, educational exercise about marine biology, returning soon. Then she hurried back to Sophia and Richard, whose conversation had taken on a more urgent tone. We need to go, Renee interrupted. Your mother is on her way back to the house. Richard nodded grimly. We'll continue this another time, Sophia. Remember what I told you about the financial statements. They're key. Sophia looked frustrated but nodded. Thank you, Uncle Richard. They parted quickly, Richard taking a path that led around to the guest houses while Renee and Sophia headed directly back to the main house. What did he tell you? Renee asked as they hurried across the sand. That Mom is hiding something, Sophia said, her voice tight with emotion. The company's financial reports don't match what she's telling the board, and there's something in Dad's trust that activates when I turn 13 that would stop the sale. That's why she's rushing everything. Did he say what it was exactly? Renee pressed. Some kind of evaluation, Sophia replied. If I can prove I have exceptional aptitude and dedication to the publishing business before my birthday, part of Dad's shares transfer to a special trust that can't be sold without my approval once I turn 18. And do you have that aptitude and dedication? Renee asked carefully. Sophia's expression hardened with determination. I will. Uncle Richard is going to help me prepare. He said there's still time, but we have to work quickly. They reached the house just as Alina's car pulled into the circular driveway. Sophia quickly hid her notebook in her pocket as her mother emerged from the vehicle, looking irritated. There you are, Alina said sharply. Where have you been? Beach walk, Renee explained smoothly. Marine biology and literature connections for Sophia's summer reading project. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, but she seemed to accept this explanation. Sophia, I need you to get changed. The Hargroves are coming for lunch, and they're bringing their son Jacob. He's about your age. I don't want to meet Jacob, Sophia protested. I have reading to do. This isn't optional, Eleanor said firmly. The Hargroves are important business associates. Making connections is part of your education, too. Sophia looked ready to argue but caught Renee's warning glance and reluctantly nodded. Fine, I'll change. As Sophia headed inside, Eleanor turned to Renee. Word, Ms. Parker? Renee's heart sank, but she maintained a professional expression. Of course. They moved to the terrace, out of earshot of the staff bustling inside to prepare for the additional lunch guests. Richard seemed quite interested in your beach walk this morning, Eleanor said without preamble. He mentioned seeing you from a distance. Relief washed over Renee. Richard had provided cover for their meeting. Yes, we saw him briefly. He recommended some tide pools Sophia might find interesting. Eleanor studied her face, searching for deception. Ms. Parker, I hired you because you came highly recommended for your discretion and professionalism. I would hate to think those recommendations were mistaken. The implied threat was clear. My priority is Sophia's well-being, Renee said carefully. In all respects. Then we understand each other, Eleanor replied coolly. Sophia's well-being includes preparing her for the life she'll lead, not filling her head with unrealistic expectations about running a major corporation at 18. With respect, Renee ventured, Sophia seems to have a genuine interest in her father's business. Isn't that something worth nurturing, even if she doesn't take over immediately? Eleanor's expression hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. This business destroyed James. The pressure, the constant competition, the stress. It killed him as surely as that aneurysm did. I won't let it destroy Sophia, too. The raw emotion in Eleanor's voice caught Renee off guard. For the first time, she glimpsed something beyond the cold businesswoman, a widow still grieving, perhaps trying to protect her daughter in the only way she knew how. I understand wanting to protect her, Renee said softly, but shutting her out of decisions that affect her future might hurt her in different ways. You've been her nanny for what, 3 months? Eleanor asked dismissively. I've been her mother for 12 years. Don't presume to tell me what's best for my daughter. With that, Eleanor turned and walked into the house, leaving Renee on the terrace with the uncomfortable feeling that she was missing crucial pieces of this family puzzle. The lunch with the Hargroves proved to be another tense affair, though Sophia managed to maintain a veneer of politeness with their guests. Jacob, a gangly 13-year-old more interested in his phone than conversation, barely registered Sophia's existence, which seemed to suit her fine. Later that afternoon, as Renee supervised Sophia's reading time in the library, the girl suddenly asked, Do you think my mother is right, that the company killed my father? Renee set down the book she had been skimming. I think stress can affect health in many ways, but aneurysms are complex medical events. No one factor causes them. She acts like she's protecting me by selling the company, Sophia said. But Dad loved that company. It was his life's work. People can love things that aren't good for them, Renee observed gently. Or people can use protection as an excuse to control others, Sophia countered. Uncle Richard said Mom always resented being just the wife at company events. Maybe she's selling because she never wanted the company and the family to begin with. That's a big assumption, Renee cautioned. Your mother is a successful businesswoman in her own right. In Dad's company, Sophia pointed out, which she inherited control of when he died, her own ventures before marrying him weren't exactly headline-making. Renee felt uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Your mother deserves the benefit of the doubt. Running a company while raising a child alone couldn't have been easy. Sophia's expression darkened. She's hardly raised me. I've had a rotating cast of nannies and boarding schools since Dad died. She looked directly at Renee. You're the first one who's actually seen me as a person, not just a problem to manage. The raw honesty in Sophia's voice tugged at Renee's heart. I'm sure the others tried their best. They did what my mother asked them to do, keep me occupied and out of her way, Sophia said bitterly. Just like she's keeping me out of the company decisions. Renee struggled for a response that was both honest and appropriate. Sometimes adults make decisions that children don't understand until they're older themselves. That's just another way of saying you'll understand when you're older, Sophia said with surprising insight. But what if it's not true? What if I look back as an adult and still think she was wrong? Then that will be your perspective to own, Renee said. But right now, maybe focus on what you can control, like learning everything you can about publishing and business, so you'll be prepared for whatever comes next. Sophia considered this, then nodded slowly. Uncle Richard said something similar. He's sending me some materials about the company tonight. Financial reports, strategic plans, things Dad was working on before he died. That sounds like a good place to start, Renee agreed, while privately wondering if Richard was crossing lines that could inflame the already tense situation. That evening, after a surprisingly quiet dinner where Alina seemed preoccupied with business calls, Renee was preparing to retire to her cottage when her phone rang. It was her sister, Tanya, and the sound of hospital noises in the background immediately put Renee on alert. "What's happened?" she asked without preamble. "Mom's being moved to the ICU," Tanya said, her voice tight with fear. "The doctors say her body is rejecting the new treatment. They're trying to stabilize her, but—" Renee sat down heavily on her bed. "I'm coming home, first flight tomorrow. The specialist says the next 48 hours are critical," Tanya continued. "Renee, they're asking about insurance coverage for some emergency procedures. I don't know what to tell them." "Tell them to do everything necessary," Renee said firmly. "I'll figure out the money. Just make sure she gets whatever she needs." After ending the call, Renee sat motionless, mind racing. She needed to get to New York immediately, but leaving in the middle of the Hamptons stay with all the tensions brewing between Sophia, Alina, and Richard. The timing couldn't be worse. Still, her family had to come first. She would have to speak with Alina in the morning, explain the emergency, and hope for understanding. As she began looking up flights, a soft knock came at her cottage door. Opening it, she found Sophia standing there in her pajamas, a laptop clutched to her chest, eyes wide with excitement. "Renee, I need to show you something," she said urgently. "Uncle Richard sent the files, and I found something huge." "Sophia, it's late. You should be in bed," Renee said automatically, though her mind was still on her mother's condition. "This can't wait," Sophia insisted, pushing past her into the cottage. "Look at these financial projections." She opened the laptop on Renee's small dining table, pulling up spreadsheets filled with numbers and charts. "See this? Dad's last growth strategy projected Winthrop Publishing would be worth almost $3 billion by next year if they expanded into the Asian market. But the valuation Mom is using for the sale puts it at barely $2 billion. "Sophia," Renee tried to interrupt. "And here," Sophia continued, pointing to another document, "Dad's personal notes about the succession plan. He specifically wanted me to take over when I was ready, with provisions for interim management until then. Mom is completely ignoring his wishes." "Sophia, stop," Renee said more firmly. "I need to tell you something important. My mother is very ill in the ICU. I have to go back to New York tomorrow." The girl's excitement drained away instantly. "What, but for how long?" "I don't know," Renee admitted. "At least a few days, maybe longer depending on her condition." "But you can't leave now," Sophia protested, panic edging into her voice. "The negotiations are happening this week. Without you here, Mom will just keep me isolated from everything, and Uncle Richard is leaving tomorrow afternoon for a business trip." "I'm sorry," Renee said gently. "My mother might be dying. I have to be with her." Sophia looked stricken, her self-absorption giving way to genuine concern. I didn't know. Is there anything I can do?" The quick shift from indignation to compassion reminded Renee that beneath Sophia's precocious intellect and sharp edges was still a child capable of deep empathy. "Just understand that I have to go," Renee said softly. "I'll speak with your mother in the morning about arranging temporary care." Sophia's face fell. "It won't be the same. The temporary nannies never listen to me." "It will only be for a short time," Renee assured her, though in truth she had no idea how long she might need to be away. Sophia closed the laptop, her earlier excitement forgot. "I hope your mom will be okay," she said quietly. "I know what it's like to lose a parent. It changes everything." The simple statement, delivered without melodrama, hit Renee hard. "Thank you," she managed. After Sophia returned to the main house, Renee booked a morning flight to New York and began drafting a text to Alina explaining the situation. Her finger hovered over the send button, a strange reluctance holding her back. She needed this job. Her family needed this job, but her mother needed her too, and no amount of money could replace the time that might be running out. With a deep breath, she sent the message, then lay down fully clothed on her bed, too exhausted and worried to properly prepare for sleep. Morning came too quickly. Renee had barely slept, spending hours alternating between checking in with her sister and organizing her departure. Alina had responded to her message with a brief acknowledgement and a request to meet before Renee left. That meeting now loomed as Renee packed a small bag with essentials. Would Alina be understanding about the family emergency, or would she see it as Renee abandoning her post at a critical time? And what about Sophia? The girl had grown increasingly dependent on Renee as her advocate and confidant. Renee found Alina in her home office, already dressed in business attire despite the early hour, typing rapidly on her laptop. She looked up when Renee knocked on the open door. "Ms. Parker, come in." Renee took a seat across from the imposing desk. "Thank you for understanding about my emergency leave. I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious." Alina closed her laptop, giving Renee her full attention. "Family comes first. I understand that better than most." She paused, studying Renee with an unreadable expression. "I've arranged for Mrs. Mitchell to oversee Sophia's care in your absence. She's known Sophia since infancy and can manage her schedule." "Thank you," Renee said, relieved that at least Sophia would be with someone familiar. "However," Alina continued, "I do need to address something before you leave. It's come to my attention that you facilitated an unauthorized meeting between Sophia and Richard, during which he shared confidential business documents with my minor daughter." Renee's stomach dropped. "Ms. Winthrop, don't bother denying it," Alina cut her off. "Richard admitted it himself, though he tried to minimize your involvement. He's an attorney who should know better than to violate client confidentiality, even for family. Sophia has a right to understand what's happening to her father's company," Renee said, deciding honesty was the only viable approach. "She's incredibly intelligent and deeply connected to her father's legacy." "She is a child," Alina countered sharply. "A child who does not understand the complexities of running a global corporation or the toll it can take. Richard is indulging her fantasy of following in her father's footsteps without considering the consequences. With respect," Renee ventured, "perhaps including Sophia in age-appropriate discussions about the company's future would help her feel less blindsided by the sale." Alina's expression hardened. "I didn't hire you for business advice, Ms. Parker. I hired you to provide stability and education for my daughter during a transitional period. A role you're now abandoning for an indefinite family emergency." The pointed comment stung. "My mother may be dying," Renee said quietly. Something flickered in Alina's eyes, sympathy perhaps, or recognition of a shared experience of loss. "I understand the pull of family obligation," she said, her tone softening slightly. "Take the time you need. Your position will remain open for up to 2 weeks. After that, I'll need to make permanent arrangements for Sophia." 2 weeks. Not as generous as it might seem on the surface, but not immediate termination either. "Thank you," Renee said. "I appreciate that." "Before you go," Alina added, "I want to be clear about something. I love my daughter. Everything I do, including this sale, is to secure her future and protect her from the pressures that consumed her father. James was brilliant, but he was also obsessive, driven to the point of self-destruction. Sophia has inherited that same intensity. As her mother, it's my job to channel it in healthier directions." The unexpected glimpse into Alina's reasoning caught Renee off guard. "I believe you want what's best for Sophia," she said carefully, "but she's struggling to understand your decisions when she feels excluded from them. Sometimes protection means making unpopular choices," Alina said with finality. "I hope your mother recovers quickly, Ms. Parker. Sophia has grown attached to you, which is both a testament to your skills and a concern for when you inevitably move on." The subtext was clear. Despite the 2-week window, Alina wasn't expecting Renee to return, or perhaps didn't want her to. Renee found Sophia waiting in her bedroom, already dressed and sitting rigidly on the edge of her bed. "Your car is here," she said flatly. "I saw it pull up." "I came to say goodbye," Renee said, heart aching at the girl's obvious distress. "Mrs. Mitchell will be looking after you while I'm gone." "She's nice, but she reports everything to Mom," Sophia said. "I won't be able to talk to Uncle Richard or look at any more documents." "Maybe that's for the best right now," Renee suggested gently. "Tensions are already high and your mother knows about the meeting at the beach." Sophia's eyes widened. "Did she fire you?" "No," Renee assured her. "My job is secure. I just need to be with my family right now." Sophia nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "I understand. Family comes first." She hesitated, then asked in a smaller voice, "Will you come back?" "Of course," Renee said, though uncertainty gnawed at her. Her mother's condition, Alina's barely concealed disapproval, the growing complications of her involvement in the family's business tensions, so many factors beyond her control. "Promise," Sophia pressed, suddenly looking younger than her 12 years. "I promise to try my very best," Renee said honestly. "And we can text while I'm gone as long as your mother approves." Sophia nodded, then impulsively stood and hugged Renee tightly. "I hope your mom gets better," she whispered. Renee returned the hug, realizing with a pang how attached she had become to this brilliant, difficult, vulnerable girl. "Thank you, Sophia. Be good while I'm gone, okay? Don't make things harder for your mother." Sophia pulled back, her expression shuddering slightly. "I'll be on my best behavior," she said, in a tone that didn't entirely reassure Renee. As the car pulled away from the Winthrop estate, Renee felt torn between two worlds and two sets of responsibilities. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tanya. "Mom stable but critical. Doctor wants to talk when you arrive." Closing her eyes, Renee leaned back against the leather seat, sending up a silent prayer that she wasn't leaving one crisis only to face another she couldn't solve. The next week passed in a blur of hospital corridors, whispered consultations with doctors, and the peculiar timelessness that comes with keeping vigil at a loved one's bedside. Renee's mother had stabilized after a frightening first 48 hours, but remained in critical condition, her body weakened by months of aggressive cancer treatments. "The new protocol is showing some response," Dr. Patel explained during one of their hallway conferences, "but her system is depleted. We need to be patient." Patience was a luxury Renee could barely afford. Each day away from the Winthrops meant less income at a time when her family needed it most. Despite Alina's 2-week window, the unspoken expectation of permanent separation hung over Renee like a shadow. Her siblings had rallied admirably. Marcus had taken leave from his summer job to help with their younger siblings, and Tanya was coordinating meals and household management with a maturity beyond her 18 years. But they all looked to Renee for decisions, for strength, for the assurance that everything would somehow work out. On the 7th day of her mother's hospitalization, as Renee sat beside the bed watching the steady rise and fall of her mother's chest beneath the hospital blanket, her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "They're signing preliminary papers today. Mom thinks I don't know." Renee stared at the message, unsure how to respond. She had maintained light contact with Sophia throughout the week, brief exchanges about books they were reading, a math problem Sophia had solved, general updates that carefully avoided the sensitive topic of the company sale. This direct reference to the business situation felt like dangerous territory. After consideration, she wrote back, "Remember what we discussed about respecting your mother's decisions, even when you don't agree with them?" Sophia's reply was immediate. "She's wrong. Dad would have never wanted this. I found more proof." Before Renee could respond, another text arrived. "Uncle Richard says we have one last chance to stop this. Will you help me when you come back?" The question carried implications Renee wasn't comfortable with. Richard seemed to be using Sophia, and by extension Renee, in some complex power struggle with a leaner. Yet Sophia's distress was real, as was her conviction that her father's wishes were being ignored. "I need to focus on my mother right now," Renee finally replied. "We can talk about this when I return. Please be careful about getting in the middle of adult business matters." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared as Sophia composed and reconsidered her response. "Finally, fine. Hope your mom is better. When are you coming back?" It was the question Renee had been dreading. "I'm not sure yet. Her condition is still serious." This time, Sophia didn't respond at all. Later that evening, as Renee was grabbing a quick dinner in the hospital cafeteria, her phone rang with Alina Winthrop's number. Her stomach tightened with apprehension as she answered. "Ms. Winthrop, hello?" "Ms. Parker." Alina's voice was coolly professional. "I'm calling to check on your mother's condition and get an update on your expected return date." "She's stabilized but still critical," Renee reported. "The doctors are cautiously optimistic, but it's too soon to know for certain when I can leave." There was a pause, then Alina said, "I understand family obligations, but I need to make decisions about Sophia's care. The summer is a critical time for her education, especially with the fall semester approaching." The subtext was clear. Time was running out on Renee's position. "I hope to return within the next few days," she said, though she had no idea if that was realistic. "How is Sophia doing?" "She's been difficult," Alina admitted. "Withdrawn, argumentative. Mrs. Mitchell reports she's been refusing activities and meals, spending most of her time in her room or her father's study." Renee felt a pang of concern. "That doesn't sound like her. Has she said what's bothering her?" "She doesn't need to," Alina said dryly. "She's making her objections to the Cowell media deal quite clear through her behavior. Richard's inappropriate sharing of business documents has only fueled her misconceptions about what's happening." "With respect," Renee ventured, "perhaps allowing Sophia some voice in the process might help her feel less powerless. She's clearly struggling with what she perceives as the erasure of her father's legacy." "I didn't call for parenting advice," Alina said sharply. "I called to determine if I need to hire a permanent replacement. It sounds like that might be necessary." The implied threat hung in the air. Renee thought of her mother's mounting medical bills, her siblings' needs, the financial security this position provided. But she also thought of her mother, still fighting for her life just floors above where she sat. "I understand," she said finally. If you need to make other arrangements, I respect that decision. My family situation requires my presence right now. There was a long pause, then Alina spoke again, her tone slightly softer. Sophia asks about you constantly. I've never seen her form an attachment like this to any previous caregiver. She's an extraordinary girl, Renee said honestly. Brilliant, perceptive, deeply loyal to her father's memory. Working with her has been a privilege. Another pause. The doctors have given no timeline for your mother's recovery. They're taking it day by day, Renee explained. Each small improvement is significant, but she's still very fragile. Alina sighed. I see. Well, keep me informed. I'll wait until the full 2 weeks before making permanent staffing decisions. Thank you, Renee said, relief mixing with continued anxiety. Please tell Sophia I'm thinking of her. I will, Alina promised, then added unexpectedly, I hope your mother recovers fully, Ms. Parker. I know what it means to watch someone you love suffer. The brief glimpse of humanity behind Alina's polished facade caught Renee off guard. Thank you, that means a lot. After the call ended, Renee sat alone in the cafeteria, stirring her cooling coffee absently. For the first time, she wondered if she had misjudged Alina Winthrop. The woman was undoubtedly cold and controlling, but perhaps her motivations were more complex than Renee had initially understood. She was still pondering this when her phone rang again, this time her brother Marcus. Mom's awake, he said without preamble, and asking for you. Renee rushed back to the ICU, heart pounding. She found her mother propped slightly against pillows, looking frail but alert, her eyes finding Renee's immediately. There's my girl, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, Renee breathed, taking her hand carefully around the IV lines. You scared us. Takes more than this to keep me down, her mother replied with a ghost of her usual humor. The kids okay? They're fine. Everyone's been so strong. Renee blinked back tears. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, her mother admitted, but I'm still here. She studied Renee's face with maternal perception. You look exhausted, baby, and worried about more than just me. Renee managed a smile, just focusing on you getting better. Her mother hummed skeptically. And that fancy job of yours, they giving you trouble for being here? Nothing I can't handle, Renee assured her, though the uncertainty of her position weighed heavily. Tell me about this girl you're caring for, her mother requested. The one who's so smart, Sophia, right? Surprised that her mother remembered details from their video calls, Renee nodded. She's complicated, brilliant but wounded, lost her father 3 years ago and hasn't really processed it. Her mother is selling the family company, and Sophia feels like she's losing her father all over again. Sounds like she needs an advocate, her mother observed. Someone to help her navigate her grief while respecting her mother's authority, Renee sighed. That's the tricky part, being there for Sophia without undermining her mother. Her mother squeezed her hand weakly. You've always had good judgment, Renee, trust it. She closed her eyes briefly, fatigue evident. Don't sacrifice your principles for a paycheck, but don't judge too quickly either. People have reasons for what they do, even when they seem cold. Get some rest, Mom, Renee urged, seeing the exhaustion overtaking her mother. I'll be right here. As her mother drifted back to sleep, Renee pondered her words. Don't sacrifice principles for a paycheck. Don't judge too quickly. Finding that balance had never seemed more challenging. 3 days later, with her mother showing steady improvement and finally moved out of intensive care, Renee made the difficult decision to return to the Winthrops. The medical bills were mounting, and while her mother was stable, her recovery would be long and expensive. You should stay, Marcus argued when she announced her plans. We've got things covered here. We don't have the medical bills covered, Renee countered gently, and we won't, not without this job. There are other jobs, Tanya pointed out. Not paying this well, Renee replied. Not with housing included, so I can send almost everything home. She looked between her siblings' concerned faces. It's just for a few more months until Mom is back on her feet. Then I'll find something closer to home. The truth was more complicated. Beyond the financial necessity, Renee couldn't shake her concern for Sophia. The girl's increasingly disturbing texts over the past few days suggested she was spiraling into a dangerous place emotionally. Mom won't even look at me anymore, *1 message read. It's like I don't exist. And later, found more files in Dad's study. Proof Mom is selling way below value. Uncle Richard says it's suspicious. The most troubling had come that morning. I know how to stop this. Mom will have to listen then. When Renee had pressed for details, Sophia had gone silent, not responding to further messages. That final cryptic text had cemented Renee's decision to return, despite her family's protests and her own misgivings. She texted Alina to confirm her return the next day, receiving a brief acknowledgement in response. Then she spent a final evening with her mother, who was looking markedly better, though still weak. "You're worried about that girl," her mother observed as they sat together in the hospital room, the sounds of the ward muffled by the partially closed door. "She's in a dark place," Renee admitted, "and I'm not sure I can help her without crossing lines I shouldn't cross professionally." Her mother studied her face. "Sometimes the professional thing and the right thing aren't the same," she said softly. "Trust your heart, Renee. It's always led you right." The next morning, Renee boarded a train to the Hamptons with a heavy heart and a sense of foreboding she couldn't shake. Sophia's last message kept repeating in her mind, "I know how to stop this. Mom will have to listen then." What was the girl planning, and would Renee arrive in time to prevent whatever rash action Sophia had in mind? The Winthrop estate appeared unchanged as Renee's taxi wound up the long drive, yet something in the atmosphere felt different. The usual staff activity was subdued, and when Mrs. Mitchell greeted her at the door, the older woman's expression was grave. "Thank goodness you've returned," she said, taking Renee's small suitcase. "The situation has deteriorated significantly." "What's happened?" Renee asked, immediately alarmed. "Sophia has locked herself in Mr. Winthrop's study since yesterday afternoon," Mrs. Mitchell reported in a low voice. "She's refusing to come out or speak with anyone, including her mother. Ms. Winthrop has been beside herself, alternating between anger and concern." "Has Sophia said anything about why she's doing this?" Renee pressed. "Only that she has evidence she's reviewing and won't come out until her mother agrees to discuss it with her." Mrs. Mitchell shook her head. "She has food and water inside and the bathroom attached to the study, so at least those needs are met. But Ms. Winthrop is at her wit's end. The final contract signing for the Cowell Media deal is scheduled for tomorrow. The timing couldn't be coincidental." "Where is Ms. Winthrop now?" "In her office, on a call with the company lawyers. She asked to see you immediately upon your arrival." Renee nodded, steeling herself for what promised to be a difficult conversation. "And the study where Sophia is barricaded?" "West wing, end of the hall," Mrs. Mitchell directed. "But Ms. Winthrop has forbidden anyone from encouraging this behavior by engaging with Sophia through the door." "I understand," Renee said, though she already knew she would need to speak with Sophia as soon as possible. Eliner's office door was open when Renee arrived, but the woman was still on her call, her back to the door as she gazed out at the ocean view, voice tight with controlled frustration. "I don't care what Richard says about the timing. We proceed as planned. Yes, I'm aware of the trust provisions. That's been handled. No, Sophia is simply having a typical preteen tantrum. It will be resolved by tomorrow's signing." She turned, noticing Renee in the doorway, and quickly concluded her call. "Ms. Parker, thank you for returning promptly." "Of course," Renee replied, entering when Eliner gestured to a chair. "Mrs. Mitchell updated me on the situation with Sophia. I'm concerned." "As am I," Eliner admitted, though her expression remained composed. "This behavior is extreme even for Sophia. I believe Richard has been feeding her misinformation about the company sale, encouraging this misguided crusade to save her father's legacy." "May I ask what specific concerns Sophia has raised?" Renee inquired carefully. Eliner's eyes narrowed slightly. "She claims to have found evidence that I'm deliberately undervaluing the company for the sale. Absurd accusations based on financial documents she couldn't possibly understand at her age." "And is there any validity to these concerns?" Renee ventured, knowing she was overstepping but unable to help herself. "That is not an appropriate question from a nanny, Ms. Parker," Eliner said coldly. "But since you've clearly already involved yourself in business matters beyond your purview, I'll be direct. The valuation is fair market value based on current industry conditions. Richard disagrees because he's sentimentally attached to keeping the company in the family, regardless of what's actually best for its future." Renee nodded, accepting the rebuke. "I apologize for overstepping. My only concern is Sophia's well-being." Eliner's expression softened marginally. "As is mine, believe it or not, this company has already cost our family too much. James worked himself to death trying to keep it competitive in a changing market. I watched it happen, powerless to stop him. I won't let Sophia follow the same path." There was genuine pain in Eliner's voice, making Renee wonder again if she had misjudged the woman's motivations. "I'd like to try speaking with Sophia," she suggested. "She might respond to me differently than staff or family." Eliner considered this, clearly weighing her options. "You may try, but do not encourage her delusions about stopping this sale. The agreement will be finalized tomorrow, and Sophia needs to accept that reality." "I understand," Renee said, though inwardly she made no such commitment. Her priority was Sophia's emotional state, not Eliner's business timeline. After leaving Eliner's office, Renee headed directly to the West Wing, heart pounding with apprehension. What state would Sophia be in after nearly 24 hours barricaded alone? And what exactly had she discovered that drove her to such extreme measures? The ornate mahogany door of James Winthrop's study stood imposingly at the end of the hallway, its polished surface unscratched despite whatever attempts might have been made to open it. Renee approached quietly, then knocked gently. "Sophia, it's Renee, I'm back." Silence greeted her, then a rustle of movement from within. "Renee," Sophia's voice came, sounding hoarse either from disuse or crying. "Is that really you?" "It's me," Renee confirmed. "Can I talk to you?" "Maybe through the door if you don't want to open it yet." More rustling, then the sound of a lock turning. The door opened just enough for Renee to see one of Sophia's blue eyes peering out suspiciously. "Are you alone? Mom didn't send you." "I came as soon as I heard you were in trouble," Renee said honestly. "Your mother knows I'm here, but this conversation is just between us." After a moment of consideration, Sophia opened the door wider, allowing Renee to slip inside before quickly relocking it. The study was a handsome room lined with bookshelves, anchored by a massive desk facing windows that overlooked the ocean. Papers were spread across every surface, along with open laptops, legal pads filled with Sophia's neat handwriting, and several empty water bottles and snack wrappers. Sophia herself looked disheveled, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept much, if at all. She wore the same clothes Renee had seen in their video call 2 days earlier. "You look exhausted," Renee observed gently. "Have you been in here since yesterday?" Sophia nodded, moving back to the desk where she had apparently been working. "I had to. Once I found these, I knew Mom would try to destroy them if she realized what I had." "What exactly did you find?" Renee asked, approaching cautiously. Sophia gestured to the papers spread across the desk. "Dad's private records. Financial projections, strategic plans, and..." She picked up a thick folder with a law firm's name embossed on the cover, the full text of his trust arrangement, including the special provisions that activate when I turn 13. Renee's eyes widened. These were indeed sensitive documents that Alina had clearly wanted to keep from her daughter. "Sophia, these are confidential legal and business papers. Where did you find them?" "In Dad's safe," Sophia replied. "Behind that painting." She pointed to a frame that had been moved aside, revealing a wall safe with its door ajar. "I've known the combination for years. Dad showed me once when we were playing treasure hunt. It's my birthday." "And what do these documents show that has you so upset?" Renee asked, though she dreaded the answer. Sophia's expression hardened. "3 things. First, Dad's latest valuation of the company before he died put it at nearly $4 billion, not the fair market value of $2 billion Mom is accepting from Cowell Media. Second, Dad specifically created a trust provision to prevent the company from being sold until I turned 25, unless I explicitly approved the sale after turning 18. She paused, seeming to gather herself before delivering the final revelation. "And third, there's evidence Mom has been systematically devaluing the company since Dad died, turning down profitable opportunities, avoiding market expansion, rejecting partnerships that would have grown our value. It's like she's been setting it up to fail so she'd have an excuse to sell." The accusations were serious, if true, suggesting Alina had deliberately undermined the company her husband had built, potentially violating her fiduciary duty to shareholders and her daughter's inheritance. "These are very serious allegations, Sophia," Renee said carefully. "Have you shown these to anyone else? Your Uncle Richard, perhaps?" "I tried to call him, but he's not answering. Probably in meetings about the sale," Sophia said bitterly. "But I've taken photos of everything and uploaded them to a secure cloud folder. Even if Mom destroys the originals, the evidence is preserved." Renee felt a growing unease. The situation had escalated far beyond a family disagreement into potential legal territory. "What exactly are you hoping to achieve by barricading yourself in here?" "I want Mom to call off the sale," Sophia stated firmly. "These documents prove that what she's doing violates Dad's explicit wishes and my inheritance rights. If she won't listen to me, maybe she'll listen to lawyers." "You're considering legal action against your own mother?" Renee asked, unable to hide her shock. "She's left me no choice," Sophia said, her young voice trembling slightly despite her determined words. "Dad built this company for me. It's my legacy, my future. She has no right to sell it out from under me just because she never wanted it herself." The pain and betrayal in Sophia's voice was heartbreaking. Whatever the truth of the situation, the girl genuinely believed her mother was betraying both her and her father's memory. "Sophia," Renee said gently, sitting in a chair beside the desk, "this is an incredibly complicated situation. I understand why you're upset, but locking yourself in here, threatening your mother with legal action, this approach may only make things worse." "What else can I do?" Sophia demanded, frustration evident. She won't listen to me. She treats me like a child who can't possibly understand business matters, even though Dad was already teaching me. She's been lying to me for 3 years about the company, about Dad's wishes, about everything. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, the first Renee had ever seen her shed. I just want her to stop, she whispered. Stop erasing Dad. Stop pretending she knows what's best for me without even asking what I want. Renee's heart ached for the girl. Whether Alina's actions were justified or not, her failure to include Sophia in decisions about her father's legacy had created this crisis. I think you need to talk to your mother, Renee said finally. Not with accusations or threats, but honestly about how you feel. Show her that you understand more than she realizes about the business, about your father's vision. She won't listen, Sophia insisted. Maybe not at first, Renee acknowledged. But barricading yourself in here isn't sustainable. Eventually, you'll have to come out. Wouldn't it be better to do so on your own terms with a clear request for a real conversation? Sophia considered this, absently shuffling some of the papers on the desk. What if she just dismisses everything I've found, says I'm misinterpreting it or too young to understand? Then at least you'll have tried the reasonable approach first, Renee pointed out. And if she still refuses to consider your perspective, there are other options that don't involve isolating yourself or creating more conflict. Like what? Sophia challenged. Like speaking with the family attorney, not just your uncle, but the firm that drafted these documents, or requesting a neutral third party to review the trust provisions before any sale is finalized. Renee was stepping far beyond her role as nanny, but Sophia's well-being seemed to demand it. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, considering. Would you be there? When I talk to her, she listens to you sometimes. The request put Renee in a difficult position. Acting as mediator between Sophia and Alina on business matters was well outside her professional boundaries, yet refusing would likely mean Sophia continuing her desperate standoff. If your mother agrees, yes, she said finally. I'll be there as support for you, not to take sides. Sophia nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try it your way. She gestured to the papers spread across the desk. But I'm bringing these. She needs to see that I know what Dad really wanted. That's fair, Renee agreed. Should I let her know you're willing to talk? Yes, Sophia said, then added with surprising vulnerability. Will you come back after? I don't want to be alone while I wait. Of course, Renee promised, relieved that Sophia was at least considering a more constructive approach. She found Alina in the kitchen, tense conversation with Mrs. Mitchell ceasing abruptly when Renee appeared. Any progress? Alina asked immediately. Yes, Renee reported. Sophia is willing to come out and talk with you, but she has conditions. She wants to show you documents she's found in her father's safe, and she'd like me present for the conversation. Alina's face tightened. The documents in question are confidential business and legal materials she has no right accessing. Be that as it may, Renee said carefully, she has seen them now, and they've clearly upset her deeply. Ignoring that reality won't make this situation any easier to resolve. And your presence at this discussion? Alina questioned sharply. What purpose would that serve except to further undermine my parental authority? Sophia trusts me, Renee said simply. She believes I'll ensure she's heard fairly. If you want her to engage in good faith, this small concession might make the difference. Alina was quiet for a moment, internal calculations visible in her expression. Finally, she nodded curtly. Fine, but you are there as an observer only, not a participant. Family business remains family business. I understand, Renee agreed, though she knew staying completely silent might prove difficult if the conversation went poorly. Tell Sophia I'll meet with her in the main living room in 30 minutes, Alina instructed. That should give her time to compose herself. As Renee turned to leave, Alina added, and Ms. Parker, I appreciate your intervention here, but don't mistake it for permission to involve yourself in matters beyond your purview. This situation with Sophia is exceptional and temporary. The warning was clear, but Renee merely nodded before heading back to the study. Whatever consequences came from her involvement, Sophia's immediate well-being took priority. She found the girl gathering selected documents into neat piles, her earlier chaos organized into what appeared to be a presentation strategy. She agreed, Renee reported. 30 minutes from now in the living room, she's letting me be there, but only as an observer. That's fine, Sophia said distractedly, focused on her papers. I just need someone there who's on my side. Sophia, Renee said gently, I'm not on anyone's side in this. I care about both you and your mother, and I want what's best for your relationship. Sophia looked up, surprised. How can you not take sides when she's clearly wrong? These documents prove it. Because situations like this are rarely as simple as right and wrong, Renee explained. There are perspectives, interpretations, emotions involved on both sides. Your mother may have reasons for her actions that make sense to her, even if they don't to you. Like what? Sophia challenged. What possible reason could justify ignoring Dad's explicit wishes? I don't know, Renee admitted, but maybe that's what this conversation is for, to understand each other better, not just to prove who's right. Sophia didn't look convinced, but she nodded reluctantly. I'll try to listen. But she has to listen too. That's all anyone can ask, Renee said, hoping it would indeed be that simple. The 30 minutes passed quickly as Sophia organized her materials and even took time to wash her face and smooth her rumpled clothes. The transformation was subtle but meaningful, a shift from defiant child to young person preparing for a serious discussion. They walked together to the living room, where Alina was already waiting, seated in an armchair with perfect posture, her expression carefully neutral. She nodded at Sophia's entrance but didn't rise. I'm glad you've decided to end this unnecessary drama, she said by way of greeting. Mrs. Mitchell was quite concerned. Not the most encouraging opening, Renee thought with an inward wince. Sophia's shoulders stiffened, but she moved forward determinedly, placing her stack of documents on the coffee table between them. I found these in Dad's safe, she began without preamble. His private records about the company and my trust, which you had no right to access, Alina noted coldly. Those documents are confidential. They're about my future, Sophia countered. I had every right to know what Dad wanted for me and for the company. Before Alina could respond, Sophia pressed on, pulling out the first document. This is Dad's final valuation of Winthrop Publishing, dated 2 months before he died. It shows a company value of $3.8 billion, almost double what you're accepting from Cowell Media. Alina's expression didn't change. Markets change. Publishing has faced significant disruption in the past 3 years. The current valuation reflects present realities, not your father's optimistic projections. Then explain this, Sophia said, pulling out another document. Dad's expansion plan for the Asian market, which internal projections showed would increase company value by at least 30%. A plan you shelved immediately after taking control, with no attempt to implement it. A flicker of something, discomfort perhaps, crossed Alina's face before her mask of composure returned. That plan required capital investment we couldn't justify during a market downturn. It was a business decision, not a personal one. What about these? Sophia continued, pulling out more papers. 3 partnership offers from major tech companies that would have modernized our digital platforms, all rejected under your leadership, all of which would have increased company value substantially. Alina's jaw tightened. You cannot possibly understand the complexities of those negotiations or the strings attached to those partnerships. Then explain them to me, Sophia challenged. Because from these records, it looks like you've been deliberately making decisions that devalued the company to justify selling it. That's enough, Alina said sharply. You are 12 years old, Sophia. You have no business experience, no legal training, and no right to question my management decisions as CEO. I have every right when it's my inheritance being sold off. Sophia's voice rose. Especially when Dad's trust specifically states that the company cannot be sold until I'm 25 unless I approve it after turning 18. She slapped down the trust document, pages open to the relevant provision. Alina didn't even glance at it. Your father's trust arrangements are more complex than a single clause taken out of context, she said dismissively. The trustees have full authority to override that provision if it's in the best interest of the beneficiary, which is you. And who are the trustees? Sophia demanded. You and Uncle Richard, except Uncle Richard opposes the sale, which means you're making this decision unilaterally. Alina stood abruptly, her composure finally cracking. Enough, you will not speak to me this way. I am your mother, and I am doing what is necessary to secure your future without the burden of a struggling legacy company in a dying industry. It's only struggling because you've made it struggle, Sophia shouted back, tears forming in her eyes. You never wanted me to have the company. You never wanted me to be like Dad. I didn't want you to die like your father. Alina's voice broke on the word, emotion finally breaking through her controlled exterior. The room fell silent. Renee, who had been watching with growing concern, saw something shift in the dynamic between mother and daughter, a raw truth finally exposed. Alina took a shaky breath. Your father worked himself to death for that company. 16-hour days, constant stress, sleeping in his office more often than his own bed. The doctors said the aneurysm could have happened to anyone, but the constant stress, the lack of sleep, the pressure he put on himself, it all contributed. She sank back into her chair, suddenly looking exhausted. I watched him choose the company over his health, over family time, over everything. And I see that same drive in you, Sophia. That same brilliant, obsessive mind that won't let go once it latches onto something. Sophia stood frozen, tears now falling freely. But the company was his life's work, she said, her voice small. He built it for me. He built it for himself, Alina corrected gently. He loved it, yes, but it consumed him. When he learned I was pregnant with you, he promised things would change. They never did. The company always came first. She looked directly at her daughter, vulnerability evident in a way Renee had never witnessed before. I'm not selling Winthrop Publishing to hurt you or erase your father's memory. I'm selling it to free you from the obligation that would have eventually consumed you too. The revelation hung in the air between them. Renee could see Sophia processing this new perspective, her brilliant mind recalibrating around information that challenged her core assumptions about her mother's motivations. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Sophia asked finally. Why keep it all secret? Alina sighed. Perhaps that was a mistake. I thought I was protecting you from painful truths about your father. He wasn't perfect, Sophia. He was brilliant and driven, but he was also obsessive to the point of self-destruction. I didn't want to tarnish your memory of him. So instead you let me think you were the villain, Sophia said softly. That you were erasing him, selling his legacy against his wishes. It seemed easier than admitting the truth, that your father's single-minded dedication to his work contributed to his death, Alina acknowledged. And yes, perhaps I've been too protective, too controlling. I saw you following the same path, becoming obsessed with mathematics and business the way he was, and it terrified me. Renee watched as years of misunderstanding and miscommunication began to unravel between mother and daughter. Alina had been cold and distant not from lack of love, but from fear of losing her daughter to the same obsessive drive that had claimed her husband. Sophia moved closer to her mother, the stack of damning documents momentarily forgot. But Dad loved the company, and I love the things he taught me. You can't just take that away. Alina reached out, tentatively touching her daughter's hand. I'm not trying to take away what you loved about your father or what he taught you. I'm trying to give you the freedom to choose your own path without the weight of obligation. The Cowell deal includes a trust fund that would allow you to pursue any education, any career that calls to you. But what if the company is what calls to me? Sophia pressed. What if I want to honor Dad by building on what he created? Alina was quiet for a moment, studying her daughter's face. Is that truly what you want, or is it what you think you should want to keep your father's memory alive? It was a profound question, one that Renee could see struck Sophia deeply. The girl didn't have an immediate answer. I don't know, she admitted finally, but I want the chance to figure it out for myself, not have the decision made for me before I even understand what I'm giving up. Alina nodded slowly, seeming to truly hear her daughter perhaps for the first time. That's a fair point. An opening had appeared in what had seemed an intractable conflict. Renee, despite her promise to remain silent, couldn't help but offer a suggestion. Perhaps there's middle ground here, she ventured carefully, a way to honor both perspectives. Both Winthrops turned to her, surprised by her intervention but not immediately rejecting it. What do you mean? Alina asked. From what I understand, Sophia turns 13 next month, at which point certain trust provisions would activate, Renee said. What if the Cowell deal were postponed until after her birthday, allowing those provisions to take effect? Then instead of selling outright, consider a phased transition. Perhaps Cowell takes a minority stake initially, with options for increased ownership over time. She looked between them. This would give Sophia time to learn about the business from the inside, to decide if it truly is her calling. And it would address your concerns, Ms. Winthrop, by bringing in Cowell's resources and expertise to modernize the company without placing the full burden of leadership on Sophia's shoulders before she's ready. Alina frowned thoughtfully. Charles Cowell wants a clean acquisition, not a partnership. Then perhaps he's not the right buyer, Renee suggested. Preserving the Winthrop legacy and giving Sophia a chance to grow into potential leadership is important. Maybe the right partner is one who values that history and is willing to be patient. Sophia was nodding eagerly. Uncle Richard mentioned other interested parties who were more amenable to gradual transitions, companies that wanted the Winthrop name and legacy to continue. Alina didn't immediately dismiss the idea, which Renee took as a positive sign. It would delay the deal significantly. The board is expecting resolution. The board works for the shareholders, Sophia pointed out, and you and I are the primary shareholders. If we agree on a different approach, they'll have to listen. A hint of pride flickered across Alina's face at her daughter's quick grasp of corporate governance. You really have been studying your father's materials, haven't you? Every chance I got, Sophia admitted. I wanted to make him proud, to be ready when the time came. Alina reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind Sophia's ear in a rare gesture of maternal affection. He would have been proud of you already. Your intelligence, your determination, even your little rebellion here, he would have approved of your fighting spirit. Sophia's eyes widened at this unexpected validation. Really? Really? Alina confirmed with a small smile. He was never one to back down from what he believed in either. She sighed, looking at the documents spread across the table. I should have been more transparent with you. Perhaps we wouldn't be in this situation if I had. And I shouldn't have broken into Dad's safe, Sophia acknowledged, showing a maturity beyond her years. Or barricaded myself in his study. No, you shouldn't have, Alina agreed, though without heat. But I understand why you felt it necessary. She was quiet for a moment, then added, I've been so focused on protecting you from your father's fate that I didn't see how much you needed connection to his memory. It was the most vulnerable Renee had ever seen Alina Winthrop, and judging by Sophia's expression, the girl felt the same way. A lifetime of distance seemed to be narrowing, if only slightly. So what happens now? Sophia asked cautiously. Alina took a deep breath. Now, I call Charles and tell him we need to postpone tomorrow's signing. Then I speak with Richard about alternative structures that might better serve the company's legacy while still addressing my concerns about your future. And I get to be part of those conversations, Sophia pressed. Age-appropriate parts, Alina qualified, a hint of her usual authority returning. You're still 12, Sophia, but yes, I'll make sure you're informed and consulted in ways you haven't been before. It wasn't total victory for either of them, but it was progress, the beginning of understanding rather than the entrenchment of opposition. Renee felt a wave of relief wash over her. This was what Sophia had needed all along, not to win the battle over the company, but to be seen, heard, and included by her mother. Thank you for listening to me, Sophia said quietly. I know I went about this all wrong, but... You felt you had no other option, Alina finished for her. I understand that feeling well. It's another trait you share with your father. She stood, straightening her outfit in a gesture Renee had come to recognize as her way of regaining composure. I need to make some calls. We'll continue this discussion at dinner. As Alina moved toward the door, she paused beside Renee's chair. Thank you, she said simply, the words clearly difficult for her. Your suggestion has merit, and your presence seems to help Sophia express herself more clearly. Coming from Alina Winthrop, this was high praise indeed. I'm just glad to see you both communicating more openly, Renee replied. After Alina left, Sophia collapsed onto the couch, emotional exhaustion evident in every line of her body. I can't believe that just happened, she murmured. She actually listened. Sometimes people surprise us, Renee observed, taking a seat beside her, when we give them the chance. She still wants to sell eventually, Sophia noted. Yes, Renee acknowledged. But she's willing to consider your perspective now, to find a solution that honors both her concerns and your connection to your father's legacy. That's significant progress. Sophia was quiet for a moment, then asked hesitantly, Do you think she's right? About Dad working himself to death? About me being like him? Renee chose her words carefully. I think your mother knows things about your father that you don't. And yes, I do see that same intensity in you, the brilliant focus that can be both a gift and a challenge. A challenge? When passion becomes obsession, when work becomes all-consuming, that can take a toll, Renee explained gently. Your mother is afraid of losing you the way she lost your father. That fear may have come out as control, but the love behind it is real. Sophia considered this. I never thought about it that way. I always just saw her as cold, unfeeling. Especially toward anything to do with Dad. People often retreat into coldness when they're protecting deep wounds, Renee said. Your mother lost her husband. That pain doesn't just disappear even years later. Like the pain of losing a father doesn't disappear, Sophia said softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. We've both been hurting, just separately instead of together. The insight showed remarkable emotional intelligence for a 12-year-old, reminding Renee yet again of Sophia's exceptional perception. Exactly, she agreed. And maybe now you can start healing together instead. Sophia leaned against Renee's shoulder, the adrenaline of confrontation giving way to fatigue. I'm glad you came back, she murmured. This wouldn't have happened without you. Renee put an arm around the girl's shoulders, allowing herself a moment of maternal affection despite professional boundaries. You and your mother would have found your way eventually, but I'm glad I could help speed the process along. After Sophia had gone upstairs to shower and rest, Renee found herself drawn to the terrace overlooking the ocean. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, the distant waves a soothing rhythm against the shore. She was still standing there, lost in thought, when Alina joined her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. She offered one to Renee, who accepted with surprise. "I think we've both earned this today," Alina said dryly, taking a sip from her own glass. "Thank you," Renee replied. "How did your calls go?" "Cowell is predictably displeased with the delay," Alina reported. "Richard, on the other hand, sounded suspiciously satisfied. I suspect he's been waiting for this development all along." "He cares about Sophia," Renee observed, "and about honoring your husband's wishes." "Yes," Alina agreed, "though his methods have been questionable. Sharing confidential documents with a minor, encouraging her to challenge my authority. Perhaps he felt it was the only way to ensure her voice was heard," Renee suggested carefully. Alina gave her a sharp look. "You're very diplomatic, Ms. Parker, another quality my daughter values in you." She turned to gaze out at the ocean. "I've spoken with Richard about creating a more formal role for you." "A role?" Renee asked, confused. "Sophia needs more than just a nanny at this stage of her development," Alina explained. "She needs an advocate, a mentor, someone who can bridge the gap between childhood and the increasing responsibilities she'll face as she grows into her inheritance." "I'm not sure I understand what you're proposing," Renee said cautiously. Alina turned to face her directly. "I'm offering you a position as Sophia's educational and developmental advisor. A longer-term role with expanded responsibilities and commensurate compensation. You would oversee not just her academic progress, but her gradual introduction to the business world, accompanying her to appropriate meetings, helping her understand the corporate environment without becoming consumed by it." The offer was unexpected and compelling. A more permanent position with the Winthrops would provide the financial security Renee's family needed, while allowing her to continue supporting Sophia through a critical period in her development. "I'm honored by the offer," she said sincerely. "But my mother's health situation is still uncertain. I may need flexibility to support her through her recovery." The position would include generous personal leave and the option for remote work when family needs arise, Alina replied, clearly having anticipated this concern. "I recognize the importance of family obligations. It's something Sophia has reminded me of rather forcefully today." There was a hint of self-deprecating humor in Alina's tone that Renee had never heard before. Perhaps the breakthrough with Sophia had cracked more than one wall around the woman's carefully guarded heart. "I would need time to consider," Renee said, "and to discuss it with my family." "Of course," Alina nodded. "Take the time you need, the offer stands." She hesitated, then added, "Regardless of your decision, I want to thank you for what you did today. Sophia and I have been locked in a silent war since James died. Today was the first real conversation we've had about him, about the future, about what we both need. That wouldn't have happened without your intervention." The acknowledgement was clearly difficult for a woman accustomed to maintaining tight control. Renee appreciated its significance. "Sophia is an extraordinary person," she said, "as are you in very different ways. Finding common ground between such strong personalities isn't easy, but it's worth the effort." Alina nodded, finishing her wine in a single swallow. "Yes, well, we've taken a first step today. There's still much to resolve." She glanced at her watch. "Dinner will be served in an hour. Sophia requested we eat together, just the three of us. I hope you'll join us." "I'd be honored," Renee replied. As Alina walked away, Renee remained on the terrace, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The day had brought unexpected revelations and possibilities. Healing had begun between mother and daughter. A potential new career path had emerged for Renee herself. And somewhere in the midst of it all, the painful truth about the bruises on Sophia's arms had finally emerged. Not physical marks, but emotional ones, the imprint of grief and misunderstanding that had gone unaddressed for too long. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Mom asking for you. Good day today. Doctor's more optimistic." Renee smiled, sending back a quick update on her own situation before pocketing the phone. There would be challenges ahead, her mother's ongoing recovery, navigating a new role with the Winthrops if she accepted, helping Sophia and Alina rebuild their fractured relationship. But for now, in this moment of hard-won peace, Renee allowed herself to feel hope. For her family back in Brooklyn. For the Winthrops in their gilded world of privilege and pain. And for herself, a bridge between worlds, finding her own path forward one careful step at a time. As she turned to go inside and prepare for dinner, Renee caught sight of Sophia watching her from an upstairs window. The girl lifted her hand in a small wave, a genuine smile on her face for the first time in days. Renee waved back, a silent promise passing between them, not of perfect solutions or fairy tale endings, but of presence, of truth, of the courage to face whatever came next together. The truth that had stunned everyone wasn't about dramatic abuse or shocking secrets, but something far more common and just as devastating. A family fractured by grief, miscommunication, and the human tendency to protect ourselves from pain by shutting others out. The healing had only just begun, but at least now they were facing the truth together instead of suffering apart. And in that simple fact lay the most powerful lesson of all.